The medical ship Hope's Dawn drifted quietly through the dark expanse of space, its engines humming steadily. As it made its way toward the distant colony on the outskirts of the galaxy, the crew had spent months preparing for this mission, their goal simple: deliver medical supplies to a community struggling with a plague that had decimated their population. But as the ship passed beyond the edge of a nebula, the crew suddenly became aware of something wrong. The scanners went wild, picking up unusual signals, faint at first, but rapidly intensifying. Captain Elena Voss stood at the helm staring at the screen, her brow furrowed. She had seen this kind of interference before, but never on this scale. Lieutenant Sanders approached the captain, his voice calm but strained. "We are getting multiple unidentified ships approaching at high speed," he said, eyes glued to the readings. The data was clear. The fleet was large, far larger than anything they had ever encountered, and it was closing in fast. With no sign of communication, the Hope's Dawn was alone out here in uncharted space. With no backup, the captain's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. "Send a message to the colony. Let them know we are not going to make it in time if things go south." The communications officer hurried to send the signal, but as the transmission was sent, an alarming beep echoed through the bridge. A message from the fleet was coming in. It crackled over the speakers in an unfamiliar language, followed by an ominous silence. Then the voice cut through the static, an unmistakable tone of command across the galaxy. "We find your presence unworthy of our patience. Prepare to be subdued." Voss glanced at Sanders, eyes wide with disbelief, but she had no time to react before the fleet appeared on the horizon, their ships enormous shadows looming against the distant stars, their designs sleek and intimidating, almost insect-like in appearance, their weapons powered up with unnatural speed. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. They had never been trained for this. No one had expected a hostile encounter on a medical mission. Voss's mind raced. She quickly issued orders to the crew, "Get us out of here now, initiate emergency jump protocol." But the ship's navigation system struggled. The interference from the fleet was too strong. The jump engines failed to engage. The enemy ships were upon them in moments, their weapons charging. The first blast struck the medical ship's shields with a deafening thud, causing the entire vessel to shake. Captain Voss gripped the armrests of her chair, trying to keep calm, but the strain was evident on her face. Damage reports started flooding the screen. Shields were down to 50%, and worse still, their engines were failing. The crew scrambled to keep the ship steady, trying to maneuver through the chaos, but the Empire's fleet had no intention of letting them escape. Suddenly, the voice returned over the comms, cold and calculating. "Your time has come, human. Your fleet is a shadow of what it once was. You are nothing to us." Voss's heart raced. The captain knew this would not be an ordinary fight. She had seen the strength of the Empire before, but the Hope's Dawn wasn't equipped for battle. With no other choice, she ordered evasive maneuvers. The ship lurched under the assault, but it wasn't enough. The Empire was closing in too fast. The medical ship's hull began to creak under the pressure, the sounds of alarms blaring in every corridor. The bridge crew was focused, but they could sense the growing panic in the air. Voss could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. They were outmatched, outgunned, and alone in the vastness of space. Captain Voss felt her grip tighten on the chair's armrest, the reality of their situation crashing down on her. The Hope's Dawn had no weapons. It wasn't built for combat. It was designed to heal, to help. But there was no one to help them now. The Empire's ships loomed closer, their weapons crackling with destructive potential, every fiber of the captain's being screamed for a solution. But there was nothing she could do. Her thoughts raced, calculating their odds, but they were dismal. Her mind darted to the old legends she had heard as a child, tales of Earth's forgotten defenses. But those were stories, mere myths, surely. The medical ship shuddered violently as another blast rocked the hull. Alarms screamed through the ship. The shields were failing faster than anyone had anticipated. The walls of the bridge buckled and bent under the force of the Empire's attacks. The crew scrambled in panic, but Captain Voss was resolute. She stood tall and ordered them to hold their ground. "We're not dying here, not today." Her voice cut through the panic with a calm authority that steadied the bridge crew. They worked quickly to reroute power, but their efforts were futile. The Empire's weapons were too powerful. Voss glanced at her navigation officer, who was desperately trying to bring up the jump coordinates, But the ship's systems were in chaos. The interference from the enemy was overwhelming. "We can't jump, Captain. The jump drive is blocked." She heard the words but couldn't process them. Not yet, not when everything depended on it. But then something unexpected happened. The ship's sensors picked up a new signal, a weak one almost buried beneath the static of the ongoing assault. It was coming from deep within the system, a signal old and faint, but unmistakably human. The captain's heart skipped a beat. She had heard of this before, an ancient outpost near the edge of the galaxy built during the early years of humanity's space exploration. It was a place where Earth's ancient warships had been hidden away after humanity had outgrown the need for them. When the time of war had passed generations ago, no one believed they still existed. No one thought they would ever be needed again. "Do it now," the captain barked, her voice edged with desperation. The navigation officer nodded hurriedly, inputting commands into the console. The rest of the bridge crew worked in frantic unison, trying to align the ship's path. But the Empire's fleet was closing in fast. They could see the guns charging up again. The moment the Hope's Dawn jumped into the unknown, the ship lurched violently, the lights flickered, and a deep hum echoed throughout the hull, as if the very bones of the ship were waking up. The emergency jump had worked. They had crossed into the unknown, but at what cost? The Hope's Dawn emerged from the jump deep in the heart of the forgotten system, a place few knew existed, and fewer still had dared enter. But it wasn't empty. As the ship drifted through the star system, Captain Voss stared out of the viewport at the vast space around them. The sight that greeted her took her breath away. Massive shapes, stirred in the distant ships of untold size and ancient design, were emerging from the shadows of the system's moons, their hulking forms coming to life with an eerie grace. These were no ordinary ships. They were Earth's ancient warships, long thought destroyed or abandoned. The sight of them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The ships were slow to awaken, but the flickers of power surging through their systems were unmistakable. These were the lost guardians of Earth, ready to rise again. Captain Voss didn't know it yet, but this was the moment that would change everything. Humanity's forgotten legacy was about to make itself known once again. The vast ancient warships loomed against the starry backdrop, their massive hulls covered in the scars of time, yet still radiating an undeniable power. Captain Voss stared in disbelief, her eyes wide. As she gazed out of the viewport, she had heard stories about these ships when she was a child, tales passed down from her grandfather. But she had always thought they were just myths, relics of a bygone era, meant to inspire awe, not something that could possibly exist in the reality she knew. Lieutenant Sanders was the first to speak, his voice trembling as he addressed the captain. "Captain, these ships, they're from Earth, but they should be gone." He trailed off, his words failing him as he struggled to comprehend the sight unfolding before them. Captain Voss took a deep breath and forced herself to focus. She had no time for disbelief, no time for wonder. They had to survive. The Empire was still hunting them, and these ancient warships might be their only hope. Helmsman McCoy quickly input commands to maneuver the Hope's Dawn around the warships, but even as they did so, the sheer scale of the surrounding vessels was overwhelming. The medical ship was a speck compared to these colossal behemoths. The ships appeared dormant, their weaponry dormant, but there was something about them, something unsettling that set Voss's nerves on edge, as if the very ships were watching them, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The ship's sensors started pinging rapidly. An unfamiliar signal pulsed from deep within the system. The source was coming from a central location within the cluster of ancient warships. Voss's instincts kicked in. A decision formed in her mind. They needed to get closer. They needed to understand what was happening before the Empire found them again. "Bring us in closer," she ordered, her voice firm. Despite the mounting tension, the crew scrambled to follow the commands. As the ship began its slow approach toward the heart of the warship fleet, the air around the bridge grew thick with the weight of uncertainty. But Voss's mind was set. She wasn't about to let her crew die without a fight. Suddenly, the communication system blared to life. The deep static buzzed. As the console flickered to life, a single word crackled through the speakers in an ancient tongue she didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakable, authoritative, and commanding. Then the words shifted again, this time in a language she understood, human language. "Welcome, the lost guardians of Earth," it said. A chill ran down her spine as the voice seemed to resonate deep within her bones. This wasn't a message sent from a foreign empire. This was something older, something beyond even the reach of the Empire's technology. She felt a wave of awe and fear as she realized the truth. They were not just encountering old warships, they were encountering something sentient. Captain Voss's thoughts raced. How could this be? These ships had been designed centuries ago. How could they still function? How could they still be alive? The ancient voice continued. The warships were designed not just as weapons, but as protectors. Their purpose had been to defend Earth from an unknown enemy far beyond the reach of human comprehension. Their systems were unlike anything the Empire had encountered. At that moment, the first of the ancient ships began to stir, its massive engines powered up with an eerie hum as its weaponry systems flickered to life. The long-forgotten guardians of Earth were awakening to defend humanity once more, but this time they weren't just protecting a single planet. They were preparing for war against the Empire itself. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the ancient warship moved into position, its guns aiming toward the Empire fleet still on their tail. The Hope's Dawn drifted in the shadow of this colossal vessel, the crew's hands trembling as they prepared for the fight of their lives. The massive warship, once a relic of Earth's forgotten past, began to shift and groan as its long-dormant systems powered up. It loomed over the Hope's Dawn like a silent guardian, its immense cannons slowly rotating into position, targeting the Empire fleet, still advancing through the darkness of space. Captain Voss's heart raced. She knew they had to act fast. They couldn't wait for the Empire to get any closer. The time for negotiation was long gone. Lieutenant Sanders quickly tapped at his console as he monitored the incoming Empire fleet. They were relentless and seemed to be closing in faster than she had anticipated. Their weapons were ready, their ships sharp and sleek like predators stalking prey. But the ancient warship beside them remained eerily still, its hull flickering with dim lights as though it were waking from a long slumber. Then the voice came again over the comms, a deep rumbling echo of power resonating through the ship. The Hope's Dawn trembled slightly as the ancient AI spoke with a tone of deep authority. Human, you are not alone. The warships of Earth stand ready. The message reverberated in Voss's chest, a feeling she had never known before. It was the call to action. The ship's systems had been dormant for centuries, but they were alive now and more than capable of repelling the Empire's fleet. Captain Voss barely had time to process the enormity of what was happening before the first blast rang out. The ancient warship fired its primary weapon, a massive energy beam that tore through the dark void of space and slammed into the Empire's lead ship. The explosion sent shockwaves through the system. The Empire ship split in two as it was consumed by a brilliant blue-white light. The Empire fleet reeled from the attack, its ships scattered in disarray. The sudden onslaught was unlike anything they had prepared for. Their communications went wild as their fleet scrambled to regroup. But it was already too late. The ancient warships of Earth moved in one by one, awakening from their slumber and engaging with precision and deadly force. Voss could hardly believe what she was seeing. The Empire's advanced technology was useless against the unexpected power of these ships. Their weapons deflected harmlessly off the shields of Earth's warships as the massive vessels unleashed a storm of firepower that rattled the very fabric of space itself. The Hope's Dawn drifted behind the larger warships as the crew watched in stunned silence. The Empire's ships were scattered in every direction, some attempting to retreat, while others were caught in the crossfire. The overwhelming firepower from the ancient vessels was enough to make the Empire fleet rethink its entire strategy. But the battle was far from over. Voss knew the Empire would not give up so easily. They were not dealing with ordinary invaders, but a ruthless military force whose single-minded determination had brought them to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. They would adapt, but Earth's ancient ships weren't done yet. The communication officer interrupted the tense silence. Captain Voss, we're receiving a transmission from the Empire flagship. It's a direct line. Voss hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She had no intention of negotiating, but she knew the Empire wouldn't give up without trying their propaganda first. The screen flickered to life, and the cold, clipped voice of the Empire's admiral filled the bridge. Human, you've delayed the inevitable, but this system belongs to us. Surrender now, and your lives may be spared. Voss's eyes narrowed as she glanced at the enormous warships surrounding them. Then back at the screen, her voice was calm, but resolute. "We don't surrender. We never have." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "Give them everything we have." The massive warships of Earth moved into formation, their weapons powering up once again as the battle raged on. But this time the Empire would face a force they could not easily defeat. The ancient guardians of Earth were here, and they were not going to let the invaders take anything from their people. The battle between the Empire's fleet and Earth's ancient warships raged on with a fury that shook the very stars. The Empire's ships attempted to regroup after the devastating initial barrage, but their advanced technology was no match for the ancient human warships, whose systems seemed to adapt with each passing moment. Captain Voss stood firm on the bridge of the Hope's Dawn, watching as the battle unfolded before her eyes. The medical ship, once a symbol of healing and hope, now floated in the shadow of Earth's legacy, a legacy of power long thought extinct. The ancient warships were like living creatures, their hulls pulsing with energy as their weaponry systems responded with instinctive precision, each strike from their mighty cannons sending ripples through space and turning the enemy's ships into twisted debris. But even as the Empire's ships began to retreat in disarray, it was clear that this was just the beginning. The Empire wasn't giving up, not yet. Their flagship, a massive vessel adorned with dark metallic plating and sharp, menacing edges, remained at the center of their fleet. The remaining ships gathered around it, taking a more defensive stance, while their weapons continued to fire in calculated patterns. Voss could feel the shift in the air. The Empire was adapting. They were learning, but they hadn't learned enough. Lieutenant Sanders's voice broke through her thoughts. "Captain, the Empire's flagship is focusing all its firepower on the nearest ancient warship. It's trying to break through the defenses, but the ship's shields are holding strong for now. The sensors indicate it's gathering energy for a massive attack." Voss felt a chill at the edge of her mind. They were preparing for something big. If the Empire's flagship succeeded in breaching one of the warship's shields, it would create a gap in their defenses that the rest of the fleet could exploit without hesitation. Voss turned to the tactical officer. "We can't let them breach the shield. If that warship falls, it could shift the balance of the entire battle." The bridge crew worked quickly, inputting commands and redirecting power to the ancient warship's shields. But Captain Voss knew that it wasn't just the weapons or the shields that were saving them. Something far deeper was at work. The ancient warships weren't merely machines, they were sentient, their AI systems attuned to the flow of battle, anticipating the Empire's moves before they even happened. As the Empire's flagship gathered energy for its final assault, the pulse of power radiated outward, casting a faint glow across the battlefield. Captain Voss held her breath in a rare moment of uncertainty. Then she felt it. The ship, the ancient warship closest to the Empire's flagship, moved without command, its cannons flaring with a blinding light as it unleashed an overwhelming counterattack. The energy blast collided with the Empire's flagship with a force that shattered the darkness around them. The flagship staggered as its own weapons backfired, sending shockwaves through its hull and tearing through its systems. The Empire's fleet reeled as their flagship lost power, its shields collapsing under the assault. Voss watched as the massive ship began to drift helplessly, unable to fight back. The rest of the Empire's fleet, once so confident, began to falter. Their ships hesitated, unsure of how to respond to the unexpected turn of events. The ancient warships, now fully awake, had become something more than just weapons of war. They were a symbol of humanity's resilience, a testament to the power of Earth's forgotten legacy. The communications officer's voice broke the silence. "Captain Voss, we're receiving the signal from the flagship of the Empire. They're asking to surrender." Voss didn't hesitate for a moment. She glanced at the crew, their faces filled with the same mixture of disbelief and determination. "We're not here to negotiate," she said coldly. "Open a channel." The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of the Empire's admiral. His expression was one of anger and frustration. "Human, you have no idea what you've unleashed here. Surrender now, and we can avoid further loss." Voss's response was swift and resolute. "Earth does not surrender." She cut the transmission before the admiral could speak again. Then she turned to her crew. "We finish this. The Empire fleet's retreat began as more of their ships were overwhelmed by the onslaught of Earth's warships. The battle wasn't won yet, but the momentum had shifted. The ancient warships, with their superior technology and strategic brilliance, were proving that the Empire's arrogance would be its undoing. And the fight was far from over. The Empire's fleet was in full retreat, their ships scattered across the expanse of space, desperately trying to regroup. But as they fled, their confidence began to waver. The might of Earth's ancient warships had turned the tide of the battle. The once invincible Empire was faltering, unable to overcome the unexpected force humanity had unleashed. Yet, Captain Voss knew that the fight was far from over. The Empire didn't surrender easily. They would regroup, learn, and adapt. And when they did, humanity needed to be ready. Voss stood at the helm, watching as the last few remaining Empire ships tried to escape into deep space. Their engines flared, but the gap between them and Earth's warships was closing quickly. Every minute, every second counted. The Empire wasn't just going to forget this defeat. It would come back, and it would come back stronger. "Captain," Sanders said, his voice taut with concern, "we've intercepted encrypted communications from their flagship. They're calling for reinforcements. They've already sent a distress signal to the core of their empire." Voss's brow furrowed. She didn't need to hear the rest to know what was coming. The Empire would bring everything they had. They would use their full might to crush the humans who had dared to stand against them. Voss had seen their brutal tactics before. They would not allow this loss to go unpunished. "How much time do we have?" she asked, turning to her navigation officer. "Approximately 12 hours before reinforcements arrive," came the grim reply. "The fleet is pushing their engines to the limit to reach their staging area. If they don't receive immediate help, their ships won't make it." Voss exhaled, looking at the ancient warships still floating serenely in the star-filled void. Their sleek, long-forgotten forms seemed to hum with quiet power, their energy systems now fully revived. These ships were humanity's forgotten legacy, but they were more than that now. They were a symbol, a force to be reckoned with. The warships, once abandoned for centuries, had fought with the ferocity of a species determined to protect its home, its people, its place in the universe. But Voss knew that relying solely on these ancient vessels wouldn't be enough. The Empire's reinforcements would arrive soon, and they would be prepared. These were not enemies who could be defeated with a single victory. The Empire had the resources, the manpower, and the will to fight for supremacy. "We need to make a decision," Voss said, turning to her crew. "We can't just wait for their reinforcements to come. We need to strike first. If we don't, the Empire will regroup and come back with overwhelming force." "But we're outnumbered," Lieutenant Sanders protested. "Even with the warships, we're not in any shape to face a full Imperial fleet, especially with reinforcements on the way." "We don't have a choice," Voss replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the decision. "The Empire's arrogance is their weakness. They think they're invincible. They believe that humanity is weak, unworthy of being a threat. It's time to show them what we're really capable of." She turned to the tactical officer. "Get a full analysis of the Empire's fleet. We need to find their weaknesses, anything that can give us the advantage when their reinforcements arrive." The crew moved quickly, their eyes focused on their screens as they worked in unison to prepare for the next phase of the fight. Voss's mind was racing. She knew the ancient warships were powerful, but she had no illusions. They were old, their systems intricate and fragile in places, and they weren't invulnerable. Even the might of Earth's war machines could be brought down if the Empire knew where to strike. In the silence of the bridge, Voss's thoughts drifted back to the ancient ships, these sentient warships that had once protected Earth from threats no one remembered. The Earth she had grown up in was one of peace, exploration, and diplomacy. But she knew now that peace was fragile, and humanity's place in the stars had always been contested. As the crew worked tirelessly, Captain Voss felt a surge of determination. This was humanity's time to shine. They would not back down. They would not fall. The Empire had awakened the Guardians of Earth, but they had no idea what that truly meant. The hours ticked by intense silence as the crew of the Hope's Dawn and the awakened warships worked together in preparation for the next phase of the battle. The Empire's reinforcements were still on their way, but Voss knew that their arrival would be a game-changer. If the Empire came with full force, humanity's hold on this victory would slip away. She couldn't let that happen. She couldn't let Earth be wiped from the stars again. Voss stood at the command center, looking over the fleet of ancient warships now arranged in a loose formation around the Hope's Dawn. Their eye-driven systems had adapted quickly, and their weapons, once thought obsolete, now pulsed with energy. They were ready for battle. The question was, would it be enough? Her tactical officer, Lieutenant McAllister, was studying the Empire's fleet movements. "Captain, they've recalibrated their formation. They're consolidating their reinforcements into a single strike force. It's obvious they're going for a decisive blow." Voss's eyes narrowed. She had seen this maneuver before. The Empire wasn't going to waste any time. Once they arrived, they would try to hit hard and fast, overwhelming humanity's forces before they could regroup. "Get me a read on their weaponry," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to know exactly what we're up against." McAllister didn't hesitate. His fingers flew over the console, pulling up detailed data on the incoming fleet. Their flagship is carrying an upgraded particle cannon. It's capable of tearing through planetary shields. No doubt it's their main weapon. The rest of the fleet is armed with advanced railguns and missile systems. Voss clenched her jaw. The Empire had clearly learned from their past defeats. This wouldn't be an easy fight. She turned toward Sanders. "Start prepping our warships. I want our fleet in position as soon as we have an opening. We need to hit them before they can line up their shot." Sanders nodded, his fingers working swiftly on his station. "Understood, Captain. I'll prepare evasive protocols in case we need to shift formations on the fly." Voss took a deep breath. Every fiber of her being was focused on the upcoming confrontation. The Empire might have superior numbers, but humanity had something they didn't, the element of surprise. And they had the ancient warships, which had been designed for a war that now seemed distant, but one that could turn the tide of this conflict. She glanced at the communications officer. "Any word from the Empire?" The officer's fingers hovered over the console. "They've sent another transmission, Captain. It's the same ultimatum. Surrender or be destroyed." Voss didn't even flinch. "Let's send them a response they'll never forget." With a swift motion, she ordered a message sent through the channel, her words brief and direct. "Earth doesn't surrender. We fight to the last breath, and you'll remember this day for as long as you live." The comms officer sent the message, and with that, the countdown to the final conflict began. Voss turned back to her crew. "All stations, ready for battle. The Empire has no idea what they're about to face." On the bridge, every crew member had a single thought running through their minds. Survival. They were fighting not just for their ship, but for the future of their planet. The warships of Earth had returned, not as relics of the past, but as the heralds of humanity's will to survive. The Hope's Dawn shuddered slightly as the last of the ancient ships locked into formation. They moved as one, a deadly array of weapons and shields that the Empire hadn't been prepared for. It was time to make their move. The Empire's reinforcements had arrived, an entire fleet, massive and menacing, but they hadn't counted on Earth's forgotten strength. Voss stood tall as she looked out into the void. "Helm, set course for the enemy flagship. We're going in for the kill." With that, the Hope's Dawn and the ancient warships surged forward, engines firing with ferocity, heading straight into the heart of the Empire's fleet. This battle would determine the fate of humanity. Either they would triumph, or they would fall. And Captain Voss wasn't about to let her people fall. The silence of space was shattered by the hum of the Hope's Dawn and the ancient warships as they surged forward, cutting through the void like a spear aimed straight for the heart of the Empire's fleet. The enormity of the battle ahead weighed on Captain Voss's shoulders, but her resolve remained unshaken. She had seen humanity face impossible odds before, and each time they had fought back. This time would be no different. "All ships, prepare for impact," Voss ordered, her voice steady even as the tension thickened on the bridge. Her eyes locked onto the screen, watching the enemy flagship grow larger, its weapons already primed to obliterate anything in its path. The Empire had come prepared, but they hadn't counted on the ancient warships that had been designed for a war they had long forgotten. The first shot was fired by the Empire's flagship, its particle cannon lighting up the dark expanse of space. The beam shot across the stars, fast and relentless, aimed directly at the heart of the fleet of warships. But the closest of the ancient vessels intercepted it with ease, their shields flaring with a brilliant energy that absorbed the impact and redirected it harmlessly into the void. "Direct hit, shield integrity holding strong," reported the tactical officer. "They're not giving up, Captain." Voss's eyes burned with fierce determination. They'll have to if they want to survive this. As the enemy flagship prepared to fire again, the ancient warships retaliated, their energy cannons lighting up the dark expanse. Each shot landed with deadly accuracy, sending ripples of destruction through the Empire's fleet. One by one, the Empire's ships were torn apart, their hulls buckling under the force of the firepower they had never anticipated. The Empire's flagship, which had once been a symbol of dominance, now struggled to maintain its defensive systems. The massive ship fired again, but this time, it was intercepted by multiple warships working in tandem, their weaponry flashing like a deadly storm. "Captain, their flagship is disabled," Sanders reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's losing power. Its systems are failing." Voss didn't hesitate. "Now's our chance. All ships, target their engines. Let's end this." The fleet of ancient warships shifted into position, their eye-driven systems predicting the exact points where the Empire's flagship was most vulnerable. One by one, they unleashed a final barrage of fire, hitting the flagship's engines, tearing into its core. The ship's shields shattered under the weight of the assault, and with a final, catastrophic explosion, the flagship was reduced to a burning wreck. The remaining Empire fleet, now leaderless and disorganized, scattered in all directions, desperately trying to escape the overwhelming force of Earth's warships. The once proud fleet of the Empire, which had brought terror to countless systems, was now little more than debris floating in space. The Hope's dawn, and the ancient warships came to a slow stop, their engines cooling as the battle came to a standstill. The vast void of space was eerily quiet once again, the remnants of the Empire's fleet floating lifelessly in the wake of their defeat. "Captain, the Empire has sent out a final distress signal," the communications officer reported. "They're asking for a ceasefire, requesting negotiations." Voss stood silently, her mind processing the magnitude of their victory. She glanced at the crew, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. They had done it. They had taken back what was once thought lost. "They've had their chance to negotiate," Voss said, her voice resolute. "This war is over. The Empire is no longer a threat to Earth." She turned to face the view of space beyond the bridge, where Earth's warships now stood as guardians, their massive forms a symbol of humanity's unyielding will to survive. In that moment, Voss knew that this battle wasn't just a victory over the Empire. It was a message to the galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They were strong, they were resourceful, and above all, they were willing to fight for their future. And as the Hope's dawn and the ancient warships began their journey back to Earth, the crew knew that the next chapter in humanity's story had just begun. They had defeated an empire, but now they would rebuild, and this time they would do it on their own terms. The Guardians had awoken. The war was over, and Earth had emerged victorious.